Welcome back to the Daily Dean. So you may have heard the phrase or, the word serotonin used in some kind of context where it makes somebody happy or relieved or calm, like this video lives rent-free in my head because it gives me serotonin, or wow, I'm running low on serotonin, I should take a break on my homework or something. And where does that really come from? Because serotonin and brains and neurons are definitely more than just buzzwords, and before I sound condescending, I do use the word serotonin, as a joke, as a meme, as a phrase or whatever. But once again, where does it come from, and what can we learn from that meme? Because I'm not trying to look down on people who don't use the scientifically accurate version of serotonin or whatever, because that's condescending, that's stupid. But what really is serotonin? So your brain is made up of neurons, and neurons are basically cells that communicate with each other through electricity and chemicals. They're in long chains and trees and webs and whatnot that are all that have entrances that spark up electricity and then trigger chemicals that then enter entrances again that sparks electricity that travels around the neuron to become chemicals again. So basically, your neurons are constantly firing back at each other and sending chemicals to one another in this little complicated dance and web of your consciousness and living being. Because even when you're asleep, even when you're unconscious, your brain is still firing and whatnot and doing its business. And some theory that I've actually read is that when you dream, that is your brain interpreting random firing of neurons in your brain. But that's a theory, and I'll explain about theories and research and findings and whatnot later on. But serotonin is basically one of the chemicals that your brain uses, that your neurons use, in order to communicate with each other. When we look at the amount of serotonin being transmitted and it present in your neurons and being sent everywhere, we find that lower amounts of serotonin, lower amounts of the chemical serotonin correlate with higher amounts of depression. And so that's where that comes from. Serotonin must be like antidepressant, because lower amounts of it must lead to, depression, or it's correlated. Now, you may notice that I use the words leads to, must mean, blank, 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 blank. But one important thing to note is that in psychology and in other sciences, you don't say leads or must mean, unless you're talking about physics and other predictable sciences. But with soft sciences related to psychology, anthropology, and whatnot, you say they're correlating with each other. Now, what does it mean for something to correlate? Let me give you an example. So imagine you took track of the amount of coffee somebody consumed, the amount of caffeine they took, and the amount of, heart attacks a group of people had. So when you plot all that data together in coordinate pairs and whatnot, you find that, the amount of caffeine someone eats or consumes correlates with a higher amount of heart attacks and whatnot. Now, you may be thinking, heart attacks are caused by caffeine? No, because you did not use correlation. You did not use causation. Because even if they're correlated, you have things like third variable problems. What if there is a third unknown variable you did not study that happens to be correlated and increased with caffeine usage, which means that caffeine isn't the definitive cause of heart attacks? What if people who drink more caffeine have higher rates of heart disease, or have perform less exercise, or do blank 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 blank? Basically, correlation means that you're taking two separate data sets, right? Two separate variables and things you're measuring, and plotting them against each other. So if somebody drinks 5 milligrams of caffeine and they have one heart attack in a year, you put those two together and then you plot all of those people's datas into your chart, and you have a correlation thing. When you plot out serotonin with the presence of depression, you find that as more people people who have less serotonin in their neurons and brain and whatnot tend to have higher rates of depression. And that's what it means for something to correlate. Because in order to say something is possibly caused by another thing, you have to perform an experiment where you introduce that serotonin or caffeine into somebody's diet or brain, and you see, does it reduce the amount of depression they have? Does it treat their emotional psychological symptoms and whatnot? And so it's important to note that when you say something correlates, it does not mean something causes that thing. And that's why science and researching and psychology is important, and how, we choose to take away from our findings is valuable, because some ways you can manipulate how your data sounds, saying serotonin is the antidepressant, and might not get your right word across, because we still don't know a lot about the brain, or about our consciousness, or about existing itself, or mental disorders, or distressing emotions and whatnot. And to be so arrogant and brash and what's that word? I forget, but obnoxious about our intelligence on the brain it's not right. It's not justifiable to say we know everything we're ever going to know about the brain itself, because science is an ongoing process. Included in that is psychology. So I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye.